Okay, everybody, in case you didn't know, my name is Ken Coles. I'm the manager of Farming Smarter, but I'm not all that smart. I'd have to tell you right now, this is the least area of expertise I have. I would have loved to have had a Bob Blackshaw or Hugh Becky, but I did do some reading up, and I've got a few tidbits of information that I think you'll find valuable. But I'd actually like to ask you guys to help me out when you can. You know, there's some pretty smart fellas and ladies here. I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. And if you tell me something that I deem as smart, you're going to get a prize. So please speak up, and it'll help you get through the rest of the day, we'll say. So how many of you guys have actually heard of glyphosate tolerant Kosha? Was anybody in the dark? Does anyone not know about glyphosate tolerant Kosha found in Alberta? Are you too chicken to put your hand up? I'll give you a prize if you did. So, you're nervous? All right, careful here. No, this is not, first of all, this is not glyphosate tolerant Kosha. We're doing a demonstration on just regular plain Kosha. Somebody asked me when where we get the seed for this. We actually did get some Kosha seed from Bob Blackshaw's crew. And we tried to plant it down that way, just on the other side of the winter wheat. And would you know it, we didn't get any Kosha growing. Interesting though, eh? So luckily I've happened to find a nice little spot where we did have some native Kosha. So we quickly switched locations just to spray some demo. And what we did with this is within Bob Blackshaw and Hugh Becky, since the discovery of the Kosha down in the Warner neck of the woods, they put a treatment list together so that we could try to sort of figure out what are the best options for controlling this new terrible glyphosate resistant Kosha. So here's the first question. Is there a unique characteristic about Kosha as a plant that might affect how we manage it? This is a pretty wide open question, so this is first prize of the day. Something about Kosha. Yes, Kosha is a tumbleweed. I don't know, do you think that one deserves a prize? It's kind of weak.
Also, the dormancy is very short-lived.
Okay, I think this is a prize here. So the answer is the dormancy is very short-lived, and that's absolutely right. Kosha produces a tremendous amount of, oh, I just gave another question away. They say probably 65 to 75% of the Kosha seed will germinate within 1 year. Within 2 years, it's all done. So it doesn't have a long dormancy. And so if we do get a situation where you've got, and this applies for regular Kosha as well, but if you do get into a situation with glyphosate tolerant Kosha, what can you do? Because you know that it's got maybe a 2-year dormancy, what can you do to start cleaning up that field?
Keep it killed for 2 years.
Okay, that's an obvious one, but... Okay, we'll give her a prize. Give her a prize. So the answer there is rotating chemistries, which is kind of obvious, a little weak. There's one more obvious. I like obvious answers, actually. What else can you do? Pardon me?
Control it every year.
Control it every year. So you want to really focus on controlling it for 2 years. So you want to maybe get into a crop where it's easy to control in 2 years. What are some of those types of crops? Okay, so cereals and not pulses. All right, give Dave a prize. No.
Controlling Kosha after harvest goes a long way.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about the seed going through the combine. I'm worried about the plants left after harvest. That's your next 2 years Kosha.
Did Dave get a prize?
Which one's Dave?
Right there.
Oh, okay.
Fill that one up and shoot him with it too. So Dave made a really good point, controlling after harvest, and it could be as simply mowing it too at that point. If you've got slough areas that have Kosha in there, even simply mowing it, as long as you get that seed down before it sets seed. The other thing is one of the a point that I didn't really quite realize is that Roundup will still kill glyphosate tolerant kochia. It's tolerant at a certain rate. But if you go in with a high rate of glyphosate and then tank mix it with one of our best options, that seed will not likely be viable as long as you get it before physiological maturity. The glyphosate will go into that seed and likely kill it. How about some other characteristics about kochia in general that are going to affect how we manage it? Elaborate.
Take it on when it's smaller.
Yeah.
Take it on when it's smaller.
Yeah. So that's what happened here.
That's what I see.
These were sprayed June 29th. No glyphosate though. We only put the tank mix component because if I put glyphosate with it, you wouldn't be able to see the differences that it really makes. So we've only put the tank mix partner, and honestly, these plants got a little bit too big and your control goes down the tubes big time. So early control is very important, and that actually leads to a good point. We know that they were discovered in Warner, and what do they do in Warner as far as crop rotation still? Yeah, so pretty dry country, chem fallow. What, do they have any other types of issues down in Warner? Yeah. Does kochia like salinity? Absolutely. So that's probably a good combination of what's happened. I think it could be very easily a saline seep area where the farmer was seeding around it for a lot of years, chem fallow, really not overusing Roundup compared to Roundup Ready crop type systems. And of course some companies right away are saying, oh no, it wasn't in a Roundup Ready crop system. They're pretty happy that it happened in this chem fallow type situation. But you've got these saline sloughs where kochia does really well. So you don't have any crop competition. Lots of times you can't get in there to spray it even. So does everybody understand now how resistant develop? And I know that Bob and Hugh have really beaten this into people's heads quite well. How is resistance formed?
Using the same crop, too little chemical.
Same crop, same chemical. Okay, somebody said rates.
Some mode of action, same mode of action over and over again.
Selection of the tolerant one over and over and over.
That's really what I was looking for. He gets 2 prizes. So it's actually not a rate thing. It is selecting for a biotype that is naturally tolerant to it. So this little triangle here, this has the groups of chemistries. So we talked about mode of actions. Roundup is a group 9, and it has always been thought to be the lowest risk to develop resistance. In fact, I've read some research papers from even the late 90s, early 2000s, where they thought that it was impossible. And the reason is it's a very complicated mode of action that it's got. It's got an enzyme inhibitor to that EPS, PS, something like that. The structure and the chemistry within that plant, it makes it very difficult for resistance. Yet, turns out we've got it. Oops. And this is what it looked like if you didn't see Bob's presentation. This is a shot of the fields in Warner. You'll notice these long stripes where the weeds weren't controlled, and that's the tumbleweed effect. So you've had one or two plants that ends up missing the spray application. It breaks off in the wind and dumps its seed all across. So you may be doing everything right on your farm, and this could roll in, and now you've got a problem to deal with it.
Aren't these tire tracks?
They look like
Sublethal Dose?
look at the bottom picture. They go like this.
You have auto steer, man. Does that look like a tire track?
Looks like some kind of
But
a
some
track.
guys haven't got auto steer, and some are very poor.
So we gotta get past the sublethal dose thing. The sublethal dose is not what creates resistance. It's by spraying the same chemistry. That one plant that's tolerant survives, and then it reproduces. Next question. How many, give me a ballpark answer, how many seeds can one Kosha plant produce?
60,000.
Holy shit. Nope.
I read it somewhere.
Closer.
Where is it?
I thought it was like 65,000 or something.
Come on, throw some guesses out. You're wrong so far.
30,000.
12,000.
2,000.
200.
You're the closest so far. 16. Okay. It's Trevor, right? Kevin. So Kevin gets it. They say in around 15 to 25,000 seeds per plant. Do you think that's a characteristic that might help to develop resistance to Roundup? They actually call that fecundity. Thank you. So the types of weeds that are already resistant in the States are very similar type weeds. Like they've got some weeds that actually produce pollen. So the pollen will also transport the trait. In this case, we've got a plant that produces a ton of seed. It's got some growing characteristics that are kind of unique. We talked about the ability to withstand salinity, I think is a key characteristic why we've developed resistance here. There's another one that I learned the other day about Kosha. Does anyone know what type of plant Kosha is? Give him another prize. So what does that mean about Kosha? And it's important to understand what does that mean, because it's going to affect how we manage the weed. It loves heat.
Drought.
It's amazing drought. It's actually very poor competitor under cool conditions. If you've got good solid, healthy crop and cool conditions, you're going to outcompete Kosha easy. Remember I told you we seeded Kosha over there? Well, we've been cool and wet. It's not exactly ideal conditions for Kosha to grow. So we couldn't get it growing.
It actually won't grow at all when it's really wet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about what happened to us. That's why we had an emergency change of plans and came over here for the demo. So the other thing with Kosha is that it's very early emerging. It's usually one of the first plants up there, right? And when do guys tend to spray their first application of chem fallow?
After all the seeding's done.
Yeah, so it probably early to mid-June. How big is Kosha by then? So everybody says, oh yeah, Roundup's no good on Kosha. It's too big. And what they did with Rustler as a chem fallow chemical was to add dicamba, which had a lot better activity on the bigger Kosha. So now we know it's early seeding. Like if you're going to get into this situation, you've got early weeds, you're going to have to focus on early weed control to get those Koshas down. And we already know that if we control them for a couple of years, the seed bank's gone. So there's actually quite a few options. And you know, tillage is still an option too, if we have to. But we've already come a long way with zero tillage so far.
But you're not going to get resist with tillage, that's one thing.
Pardon me?
You will kill it with tillage.
Yeah.
You're not going to build up the resistance.
Yeah. Yeah, that tillage is an option. It's kind of a swear word around here, but we like to mention it once in a while. So Bob Blackshaw's plots, where we actually do have the seed, the Roundup, or not Roundup, sorry, glyphosate tolerant Kosha. He's got a strip of glyphosate tolerant Kosha and then a strip of just regular Kosha. And he's got a dose response curve, so our dose response trial. So different rates of glyphosate. And I was over there yesterday with Jamie and we rated all of his plots because he hasn't rated them yet. And I wanted to have some fresh data for you guys. Keep in mind it's preliminary. It's me that rated it, it's not Bob. But really quite interesting effects that we've seen. So the 225 grams of active ingredient per hectare, that's about half of a half-liter rate equivalent. And the 450 active, you can already see we've got quite a bit of control on the glyphosate tolerant Kosha. Even at a lower rate, I think half of this, 120 or something like that, had an effect on this Kosha. So while there's tolerance, it's at a pretty low rate so far. So when we're managing this issue, we want to be cautious not to make it worse. So you don't want to rely solely on higher rates of glyphosate, because that's just asking for trouble. So on my ratings, the 225 rate, which is this picture right here, I only gave it about a 10% control. As soon as we move to a half liter, we've jumped up to about a 55% control rating. When you look at herbicides and you look in the blue book, anything over 80% is actually the word control, and 70 to 80 is suppression. So we're not even there yet at this half liter rate. But as soon as we jump to 900, that's about 1 liter equivalent per acre, we're up to over 80% control. So it gives you an indication of the level of tolerance that we have in southern Alberta so far. So they got crazy with the rates, and we went up to 3150. And this is all dead.
There's one plant there, isn't there? One plant looks
Give him a prize. He gets another. Did you get one already? No. Oh, you get a prize. Take that back to the kids. Shoot them up. So 900 grams per hectare is 1 liter. 3.5. So about 3.5. Getting up there. Actually, it's back in the day that was probably rate that was used. It was 2 to 3 liters an acre. Was actually pretty common back when it came out. So what was your name again?
Eli.
Eli pointed out we've got one plant there. What do you think's going to happen to that plant if it sets seed? And then it rolls all over Dave's field. Now all of a sudden you've got uber tolerant Kosha, glyphosate tolerant Kosha. So we got to be really careful about that. While we can be really happy, that our mindset on herbicide control, 90% is awesome. It's not awesome. 95% isn't even awesome. We got to get them all. And if we're just having somebody going in blindly and spraying Roundup and we've got these escapes, and all of a sudden the tolerance level goes up and we've got another game. So at that level, I did give it over a 90% rating. As you can see, it's pretty clean. Yeah.
Is Bob going to test that plant? Because what if it's just a late flush?
Yeah, that's actually another good point. He gets a prize too. Kosha does tend to germinate often. And lots of times you can have misses. And when the Kosha gets bigger, we run into coverage issues. So there's certainly, lots of times you'll have a canopy of Kosha that's already too big. You spray it, and then there'll be these tiny little suckers underneath that as soon as the top growth dies off, they've got access to sun and they grow again. So certainly we have to keep that in mind, and it's a really good point.
What was the staging at there?
Down at their staging, they actually only wanted it to be about 2 inches high. No taller. So these were sprayed about 2 weeks ago at their site. And they're going to go in and actually do mechanical quantitative biomass analysis. What I've done is a visual subjective rating just to give us an idea of what type of situation we're into right here. So this was just the rate of the dose rate that goes up. As soon as we hit that half liter, we jump to 55. We've gone to 80% at 1 liter, and we're actually getting 90% control anything past about 1.5 liter per acre. But I don't know if guys are spraying at that rate anyways. It's just kind of a nice thing to know. So now to the meat of the efficacy side of things. And in Bob's trials, he's had a lot of different tank mix partners. I can't really share this with you, but you guys can come by and take a look. I've also matched on our stakes when we take a quick walk through our demo. I've written down the percent control from Bob's trials, which are sort of more realistic, sprayed at a smaller stage. This is actually a good demonstration to see what happens when you let them get too big. We are getting some pretty good control, but there's going to be lots of escapes there. So one of the interesting things that I found in rating this 4 replicate trial was certain tank mix partners actually antagonize control. Any ideas which ones? No. No, those ones looked all right. They keep in mind in Bob's trials, glyphosate was mixed with the tank mix partner in that trial.
Ken, did you find a difference in water volume, or is that on a whole different ball of wax?
Haven't no attention to water volume in his trials yet. Yeah, coverage is important with Kosha. So I would as a management technique, I think the highest water volumes possible. Right? I know down in the dryland areas guys don't like to haul water much, but if you're anywhere nearby and you want to make sure you're getting all your Kosha under control, higher water volumes for sure. Especially when you're trying to get smaller plants too. So things that we might commonly think were pretty good. Pretty sure I saw a little antagonism with 2,4-D and actually really poor control with 2,4-D. So it was, we've got them ranked in order. The blue bars are the glyphosate tolerant Kosha and the red bars are the regular Kosha. So all of a sudden where we've got decent control on the glyphosate tolerant, some of these ones came down in control on the regular Kosha. So things like even fluorozolam and bromoxynil kind of reduce control on the regular Kosha, which is basically an antagonism of the Roundup, because the Roundup does a really good job on Roundup on its own. And this was only a ½ liter rate. On regular Kosha, we got about 92%. But then this is the glyphosate on its own. And then some of these tank mix partners are actually reducing the control on the regular Kosha. So I can tell you right now,
Must have been small.
yeah, heat was one of them.
That's what I was
Fluorozolam and bromoxynil.
Must have been small stuff.
This is what I was getting at.
Yeah.
The contact herbicide burned the leaves too quick. The Roundup hasn't got a chance to. That's what
I have seen that, yeah. In fact, the best control we had was with paraquat, which is that old gramoxamone, which is also a contact herbicide, but it nuked it really well. So the contacts are a nice option.
because it's a herbicide by itself, very strong compared to the Vermont.
Yeah. And the thing with heat is that, and you can see it in the plots here, is it burns it really, really fast. Yeah.
Hey Ken,
Yes, sir.
your PDQ there, what was your water rate there?
He usually goes around 10 gallons an acre. Yeah.
So he,
Water volume in that
A lot of water?
no, you're low.
I'd have to check with Bob if they did any different water rates, but I really doubt it. I think he would have sprayed everything the same.
10 should be a good
Yeah.
average.
Yeah, 10's kind of a nice ballpark. Sometimes I think that Liberty likes it to be 15, right? Okay. So
How did velocity? Not velocity.
we've got Infinity in here.
Infinity. It's a-
Infinity did pretty well.
It's a contact.
There's Vermont.
Problem is with all of these names, trying to figure out what the trade names were.
Fluorozolam is like pre-pass.
So Infinity on its own, I had at 82% on the glyphosate tolerant. But it was up to, it was 95 on regular Kosha. Yeah. So possibly some antagonism. So we talked about groups and modes of action. Surprisingly enough, one of the best treatments was that the new, was it, where is he, the guy? CPS UAP guy, Optico Trio just came out this year, right? Yeah. 2 years ago? So Optico Trio is just basically a mix of a bunch of old chemistries, but it's got a number of different groups in it. It was one of the best looking in Bob's trials on the glyphosate tolerant, over 92%. And that brings to point another concern that we have with our tank mix partners that nobody did really mention about Kosha. I'll give you 2 prizes for this one.
For true resistance.
Thank you. So we've got other resistance to deal with. So we don't necessarily want to be just tank mixing with a group 2 herbicide. So good. So that's about, oh, you know, I was going to mention actually, I was reading up yesterday and I came across an article in the CBC regarding this whole outbreak of Kosha, and the title was Superweed Found in Alberta. Superweed. And you know what I like to do on the CBC articles is I like to go down and check out all the comments, because the comments are mostly from city folks, right? Half of the comments were, oh man, that was a pretty misleading title. They thought you were talking about BC Bud. A lot of comments on that, Superweed. They were pretty excited about that. And then the rest of them were all, Monsanto must die. And it's just kind of neat, you know, because we sort of forget about that perception, but as soon as that goes out into the public, it's like, yeah, you guys are just not managed things properly. And it's unfortunate that it gets that way, and I don't think Monsanto is to blame for glyphosate tolerance. I mean, we've all known, we've always been afraid of this happening. I didn't think it was going to happen this soon, to be honest with you, but we have been spraying Roundup now since the mid-70s. Back when I mentioned reading some of those papers in the late 90s, they said, well, we haven't developed it in 20 years, it must not happen. So it just took an extra 10 years or 10, 15 years, and now we've got it. So certainly, you know, being cautious with Roundup Ready crops, proper rotation, understanding the biology of the weeds that we have, I think allows you to sort of attack it from a different angle. I think that salinity issue in the Warner area has been one that we've sort of forgotten about. Salinity was a big issue. I know the guys in Warner know it's still an issue, but we haven't been addressing it like we used to in the past. So we forget about old problems, and then all of a sudden we got a new one that's twice as bad. So, you know, it's just to keep yourselves informed. We don't have to chastise and run the people out of the country. It's not their faults either, I don't think, but just a general awareness to keep this under control and keep it from spreading into other areas. So that's about all I had for this session. You certainly are welcome to take a look at the demos that we do had. Like I said, the percent control I wrote in small letters there. Those are the ratings I took from Bob's plot. Bob will be speaking at our conference in December to present some of the preliminary results from his trials, and he's always available. He also presented some of his information at the past irrigated agronomy update, and those presentations are available online. And if you guys need anything from me, you can always drop me a line.
If you think about eradicating the glyphosate resistant Kosha, look in the county of Warren, we're in there, lots of salinity.
Yeah.
We try to, even the wasteland that you can get in, we try to do something to it, but how many acres of wasteland is there where Kosha grows unchecked? So
yeah.
It's a huge.
So I did read that short rotations of perennial crops is actually a nice strategy as well. So you can actually go alfalfa for a couple of years and make sure that you're cutting it all the time. I think that's actually a pretty good strategy. Yeah, yeah. Any last questions? Okay, it'll take 2 minutes to check out the plots, and we don't actually have to load up if you don't want to. See those fellas with the white shirts? We're going to head down there.